Have you ever had a moment in your life when everything changed in just a few seconds? A moment when a single word, a simple gesture, or even silence itself could completely transform who you are? Well, let me tell you about the day my life turned upside down, or perhaps finally fell into place. My name is Mary. I'm 59 years old, and I live in Savannah, Georgia. For most of my life, I believed that being a mother meant always being ready to fix every problem my children faced, no matter the cost. But sometimes, life has its own way of teaching us that what we think is love isn't always truly love. Sometimes, it's just the fear of not being loved anymore. That day was a hot Tuesday morning in March, the kind of humid southern heat that refuses to leave. Sunlight streamed through my kitchen window, catching the dust floating lazily in the air. I was starting my morning routine: 2 slices of toast, a little butter, and a cup of black coffee. No sugar. That habit had followed me for 4 years, ever since I bought my first home after a lifetime of renting. It was a small house, 2 bedrooms, 1 living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. I'd remodeled 2 years earlier with the money I saved from countless late nights sewing for extra cash. Nothing fancy, but every inch of that home was mine, chosen, painted, and paid for with my own hard work. I painted the walls a soft yellow, a color that made me feel warm and happy, even though my late husband once said it was too bright. At 55, after years of having to ask landlords for permission just to hang a picture, I had finally achieved my biggest dream, a place that truly belonged to me. The dining table in the kitchen was a second-hand find from a family who had moved away. I sanded it down and painted the legs white. The chairs didn't match, one yellow, one blue, and one green I'd found on the curb and fixed myself. Some might call it mismatched, but to me, the piece told a story, one of frugality, strength, and independence. I was stirring my coffee in an old aluminum pot, the kind that somehow makes the best coffee, when I heard the front door open. It wasn't the sound of the doorbell or a polite knock, but the sound of someone who had a key and believed they had the right to use it whenever they pleased. I didn't even have to turn around to know who it was. David, my eldest son, 32, walked in as if he owned the place. Ever since he was little, David had believed the world revolved around him, that every door should open for him, that the word no simply didn't apply. "Good morning, Mom," he said, though there was no real warmth in his tone. He said it like someone announcing their presence before delivering a decision they'd already made. I turned around slowly, wooden spoon still in my hand, and looked at the face I knew so well, the face of someone who had already decided everything and was just here to inform me. David was a handsome man, like his father had been: tall, dark hair, and those gray-blue eyes that could look soft when he wanted something, or cold when he didn't get his way. And right then, they were ice cold. "Good morning, son. You want some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "I just came to tell you something." He sat down in the yellow chair at the kitchen table, as if it were his throne. "Lisa, the kids, and Grandma Helen are moving in here." I froze, the spoon suspended midair, as if someone had hit pause on my life. For a moment, I thought I misheard. Or maybe it was a bad joke. "What did you just say, David?" "It's simple, Mom. Our place is too small. Ethan and Chloe are getting bigger. They need more space. And Grandma Helen's not doing great health-wise. She needs somewhere quieter and roomier. You've got plenty of space here. And you live alone." That last part, "you live alone," hit me like a slap. As if my solitude was a waste. As if my peace was a problem that needed to be fixed. "And you made this decision without even asking me?" He sighed, sounding impatient, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Mom, don't make this complicated. It's just temporary. Until we find another place. You know how tough things are right now. You've always been the understanding one. You can't just turn your back on family, right? Temporary. That word echoed in my mind like a warped bell. I knew my son too well. In his vocabulary, temporary meant until I've sorted out my life with mom's money, time, and sacrifices. No rush and no need to ask her permission. David, this is my house. I worked for 35 years to have it. I can't just, Mom, everything's already arranged. He cut me off coldly. Lisa already updated the address with her job. The kids know they'll be living with Grandma. They're really excited. And Grandma Helen has already told everyone in the family that she'll be living with us. There's no turning back now. Each word hit me like a stone dropped into a still pond, shattering the calm I had spent my whole life building. They hadn't just decided for themselves. They had announced it to the world, made plans, set expectations, and I, the homeowner, was the last to know. You mean everyone knows about this, except me? He shrugged, his tone casual. Mom, we knew you'd say yes. You always help the family when we need you. And in that moment, something inside me woke up. It wasn't anger, at least not yet. It was a cold, sharp clarity, like a freshly sharpened knife sliding through my veins, forcing me to see what I had long refused to see. After 59 years of living and 29 years of being a single mother, I finally understood one thing. I had confused motherhood with submission. I had mistaken being a good mom for having no say at all. I had confused devotion with weakness. So, where exactly are you planning for everyone to sleep? I asked, my voice eerily calm. We figured this out, David said. Ethan and Chloe will take your sewing room. It's perfect. Plenty of space for 2 beds. Grandma Helen will have the guest room. And Lisa and I will sleep on the pull-out sofa in the living room. Just for now. My sewing room. The space I built with my own hands, my old sewing machine, my cutting table. Bolts of fabric arranged by color, spools of thread lined up like a little rainbow. The place I turned to whenever life felt too heavy, my sanctuary, where I created beauty from my own hands. And now, they wanted to turn it into a children's bedroom. And you don't think I'd mind losing my workspace? David shrugged. Mom, you don't sew that much anymore anyway. And it's just temporary, remember? A few weeks, maybe a couple of months at most. A few months. The story was already changing. First, it was temporary. Then a few weeks. Now a few months. Soon it would be a year or 2. And I'd be trapped in my own house, serving a family that never even asked if I wanted to. We were both silent. A few seconds felt like hours. He looked at me, waiting for the familiar words. All right, son. Like every other time. But I looked back, calm, in a way that even surprised me. When are you all planning to move in? This Saturday. I already rented a moving truck. It's expensive, but what can I do? Family comes first. Saturday. 4 days away. 4 days for them to prepare to take over my home and not one moment to ask if I agreed. 4 days for me to prepare to lose my privacy, my routine, my space, and my peace. He laughed a real laugh, like I had just told a joke. Oh, come on, Mom. You can't refuse to help your own family. That's not who you are. He was right, or at least, he used to be. That wasn't the Mary he knew. The Mary he knew was the woman who worked 3 jobs to pay her son's tuition. The one who stayed up all night sewing so her daughter could have a graduation dress. The one who lent money she didn't have so he could get married. The one who never said no. Never complained. Never put herself first. But maybe it was time for him to meet a different Mary. All right, David. The words slipped out of my mouth before I even thought them through. He smiled, relieved like a child, finally allowed to stay up past bedtime. I knew it. You always understand, Mom. You're one of a kind. He stepped forward, and kissed my forehead the same gesture he used to do as a boy. Every time he got exactly what he wanted. Special. One single word, yet it hurt more than any other. I wasn't special. I was convenient. I was the mother who always said yes, who always found a way to fix other people's messes, who always put herself last. I was special, the same way a fire extinguisher is special. People only remember it when they need it. Lisa's going to be so happy to hear this, he said as he walked toward the door. She was worried you might react badly, but I told her Mom always understands. As always. Those 2 words summed up my entire life. Mary always understanding. As always. Mary always solving problems. As always. Mary always ignoring her own needs. As always. David, I called out as he reached the door. What is it, Mom? Did you already tell your landlord you're moving out? Yeah. We gave our 30-day notice yesterday. That's why we have to move by Saturday. No point paying another month's rent for nothing. So they had burned every bridge. This wasn't just a decision, it was a fait accompli. No backup plan. No turning back. If I said no, they would have nowhere to go. They had bet everything on the belief that I would cave, and they were sure they were right. After he left, I stood silently in the kitchen, staring at the cold pot of coffee. My mouth tasted bitter, and not because of the coffee. I looked around my little house, the worn blue laminate table, the mismatched plates I'd collected over the years, the crocheted curtains I made during a week I was stuck home with the flu, the small but cozy sofa where I watched movies each quiet afternoon. Every object in that house told a story. The story of a woman named Mary, who started over from nothing at 30, built a life with her own 2 hands, saved every penny, gave up new clothes, picnics, restaurants, vacations, and the simple joys other women took for granted, all so her children could have the best she could offer. From the kitchen window, I could see my tiny backyard garden. Nothing fancy, just about 10 square feet where I grew mint, basil, rosemary, simple herbs I used for cooking or tea. But even that little corner was about to be invaded by Ethan and Chloe's toys. Laundry lines full of clothes. Maybe even a swing David and Lisa would put up without ever asking me. Then, a memory came rushing back. 2 years ago, when I remodeled the bathroom, the contractor asked if I wanted a small bathtub instead of a shower stall. "You live alone," he'd said. "You get to choose the kind of bathroom you want." At the time, the idea felt too indulgent. Who was I to deserve that kind of comfort? A middle-aged woman living alone didn't need something so luxurious, right? So I told him to install the standard shower. But now, I realize he was right. I did have the right. The right to have a bathtub if I wanted one. The right to paint my walls any color that made me happy. The right to turn the TV up loud. To wander the house in my pajamas in the morning. To eat whenever I wanted. Or not cook at all if I didn't feel like it. I'm 59 years old, and for the first time in my life, I realized I have rights. I picked up the phone and called Carmen, my 62-year-old best friend and neighbor, the one who had been my rock all these years. Carmen was a widow too, but she had chosen a different path. She sold her big house in Jacksonville, bought a small apartment, visited her grandkids out of state, took painting classes, and even fell in love again for 2 years. "Carmen, can you come over? I really need to talk." "What's wrong, Mary? You sound strange." "It's nothing serious. Or maybe it is. Maybe it's the most serious thing that's ever happened to me. I don't know yet." "Oh, Lord, you're scaring me. I'm coming right over." While waiting for Carmen, I walked into my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept my important papers. There it was, the deed to the house, under my name, fully paid off. Next to it was the savings book I opened 2 years ago, a secret account none of my children knew about. Money I had saved from long nights sewing extra work, weekends selling homemade pastries, and every spare dollar from my modest pension. Not a fortune, but enough to matter. And for the first time in 59 years, I knew exactly what I would use that money for: to buy something no store in the world could sell my freedom. Carmen arrived 15 minutes later, moving quickly, as only a friend who truly understands does. She came in through the back door like always, bringing with her that soft, familiar perfume that instantly calmed me. At 62, she still carried herself with quiet confidence. Silver hair neatly trimmed, clothes tidy, the posture of a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted from life. "Mary, what's going on?" "Phone." I was worried sick. I took a deep breath and began telling her everything: how David suddenly showed up, how he declared that his whole family would be moving in with me, and how it felt like being crushed by a speeding train with no mercy. As I spoke, the memories unfolded one by one, like old photographs spread across a table. "Carmen, you know what? While waiting for you, I thought about when everything first went off track. Or maybe when I first started losing myself." Carmen took my hand. "Go on, my dear friend." "It was after James's funeral," I said quietly. "It was one of those gray August days. David held my hand. Anna sat on my lap, and little Laura was asleep in her stroller. My 3 kids came into my life one after another, like life itself didn't want to give me a break. I didn't have room for grief, just 3 small lives depending completely on me. People came to offer condolences, all saying the same thing: "Now you have to be strong, Mary. The kids need you." I paused, feeling the weight of that memory. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked if I was scared. No one asked what I needed. It was as if I disappeared in their eyes, no longer a woman in pain, but just a role. The mother who carries it all. Carmen nodded, her eyes soft with sadness. She understood she'd been through the same thing, 5 years before me. "I remember that first month after the funeral," I continued. "I barely got out of bed. David kept asking when his dad would come home. Anna cried all day, and poor Laura, she just sensed something was wrong, though she couldn't understand it. I didn't have time to grieve, no time to process the loss. I had to get up, work, and keep going." I walked to the living room window and looked out at the street where I'd lived for 4 years. I remembered that first day job hunting, leaving the kids with my neighbor Margaret and knocking on doors downtown. I had no skills besides raising kids and keeping a home. Who would hire me? "And that's when you discovered sewing, right?" Carmen asked, knowing part of my story. "Yes," I nodded. "But it wasn't really a discovery, it was desperation. I'd learned a little sewing from my mother when I was young, but I never imagined it would be what saved my family." I sat back down on the old couch in my living room. I started by hemming pants for Mrs. Henderson at the end of the block, $5 a pair. It doesn't sound like much, but at that time it was enough to buy milk for the kids. What I never told Carmen because it hurt too much were those endless nights. You know what the hardest part was, Carmen? The late nights. When the kids were asleep, I'd still be at the kitchen table, sewing until 2 or 3 in the morning. The dim yellow light, my eyes burning, but I couldn't stop. Every piece of clothing I finished meant food on the table, medicine when someone got sick, or another payment toward the house. "You worked yourself to the bone," Carmen whispered. "Yes, I did. And I was reborn more times than I can count," I said. "Because it wasn't just the work, it was everything." David had always been the difficult one, even more so after his father died. He became rebellious, mean to his sisters, constantly getting in trouble at school. Every week I was called in by his teacher. "Your son needs more attention, Mrs. Mary." As if I had any extra time or energy to give. I got up and paced the room, restless with old memories. What hurt the most wasn't the struggle. It was the looks from people. In the grocery store, at the school gate, on the street. That mix of pity and judgment. "Poor Mary. widowed with 3 kids. And then the whispers, can she really handle it? Maybe she should find herself a new husband. Carmen sighed. People always have something to say about someone else's life. Exactly, I replied. And that's why I started living, just to prove that I could do it. David wanted to play baseball. I paid for it, even if it meant sewing until 4 in the morning. Anna wanted the nicest outfit at school. I skipped lunch for weeks to buy it. Laura grew fast and needed new clothes. I tore apart my old dresses to sew new ones for her. Carmen looked at me with deep sadness. I could tell my story was heavy even for her. But the worst came when the kids grew older and started feeling ashamed of me, especially David. When he got to high school, he didn't want me coming to parent-teacher meetings anymore. He said the other moms looked classier, while I always had calloused hands, pin-pricked fingers, and worn-out clothes. How ungrateful, Carmen exclaimed. At the time, I didn't see it that way. I sighed. I thought it was motivation, a reason to work harder. I told myself, I'll work more, earn more, dress better so he'll be proud of me. I sat down again, exhausted just from remembering. Then I started getting bigger orders, wedding dresses, suits, uniforms for local businesses. I worked from 5 a.m. until midnight. My daughters learned to cook simple meals because I barely had time to step into the kitchen. David complained the house was always messy, but the truth was, I simply didn't have the strength to clean anymore. Did you ever think about getting remarried? Carmen asked softly. Of course I did. There was Jacob, the baker who owned the shop at the end of the block. He was a widower too, with 2 grown sons. A kind man, he even invited me out to dinner a few times. I smiled sadly. But when David found out, he lost his mind. He said I was dishonoring his father's memory, that he'd never accept another man in the house. Anna and Laura were still little, too young to understand. But David managed to convince both of them that I'd done something wrong. And you gave up on Jacob? I did. I nodded. At the time, I thought I was being a good mother, putting my kids first. I stood up to pour some water, my voice trembling. But now I realize I taught them that my happiness didn't matter, that I had no right to my own life. Anna and Laura are kind and thoughtful. As they got older, they encouraged me to go out, to do things for myself. But David isn't like that. He learned that I exist only to fix his problems. When he turned 18, he wanted to take a technical course at a private school. The tuition was expensive. I didn't have the money, but he said it was his dream, that without it, he'd have no future. So, I worked 3 jobs at once for 2 years to pay for it. I took a sip of water and continued. On his graduation day, do you know what he said to me? He just said, "Thanks, Mom. Now I'll get a good job and won't have to worry about money anymore." Not a single word like, "Thank you for sacrificing for me," or, "Now I'll help you out, Mom." To him, everything I did was just my duty. And that's when he started treating you badly? Carmen asked. No, I shook my head. That's when I realized. He'd always treated me that way. I just thought it was love. I took a deep breath. When he got a job, I thought things would change, that I could finally rest, maybe study again, do something for myself. But no, he lived with me until he was 28, saying he was saving up to get married. Living with Mom was cheaper, but he never lifted a finger to help. I still cooked, washed, cleaned for him. He earned his own money, but his money was his, and the bills were mine. Carmen shook her head, angry on my behalf. And when he married Lisa, you know what he said? "Mom, now that you're on your own, don't worry. We'll visit you often." Like he was doing me a favor. Oh, dear Lord, Carmen murmured. Yes, I nodded. And those visits? They were always for favors. When Lisa was pregnant with Ethan, They asked me to cook and store meals for them. When Ethan was born, I stayed at their house for a week to help. When Chloe came along, same story. I paused, took another sip of water, my throat dry. The painful part, Carmen, is that all that time, I thought I was being a good mother. I thought being always available, always sacrificing, always putting them first was love. But it wasn't. It was fear. Fear of what? Carmen asked gently. Fear that they wouldn't love me anymore. Fear that they'd abandon me. Fear of being truly alone. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I was wrong, Carmen. I confused love with unconditional submission. I was always afraid that if I ever said no to something, they'd stop loving me. Carmen hugged me. But what matters is that you see it now, my dear friend. I nodded, wiping my tears. Yes. Today, at 59, I finally understand that real love must come with respect, and respect means asking before deciding for someone else. It means considering another person's feelings. It means never treating someone as if they're an object, ready for your use anytime you please. We let go and looked each other in the eyes. You know, I said softly, I realized I needed to change about 3 months ago on Ethan's birthday. They threw a party at their house and asked me to come help. I spent the whole day cooking, cleaning, serving guests. By the end, everyone had gone home. I was exhausted, standing in the kitchen washing dishes. That's when I heard David talking to a friend in the living room. What did he say? Carmen asked. I clenched my fists. He said, It's great having a mom who never complains, who's always there to help. My mom has never once complained about anything. I was shaking with anger, just remembering those words. Never complains, Carmen, as if I were some obedient housekeeper, not a mother who deserves gratitude and respect. Carmen shook her head. That's awful. That was the moment, I said. I decided to open a secret savings account. I started saving money not for them, but for me, to have an emergency fund, to have options, to be able to say no when I needed to without fear. I stood up, grabbed the folder I'd prepared, and handed it to Carmen. For 2 years, I've saved every dollar I could, and now I finally have enough to choose freely. Not a fortune, but enough to stop accepting everything out of desperation. Carmen looked at the papers, her eyes wide in disbelief. Good Lord. Mary, you manage this just from sewing and your pension? Yes. And you know what the best part is? For the first time in my life, this money is only mine. Not for paying tuition, not for helping someone get married, not for someone else's emergency. It's for my freedom. I put the papers back in the drawer. Today, when David announced that his whole family was moving in without even asking me, it felt like a switch flipped in my head. I looked at him and thought, no, enough. Mary will not let herself be treated like this anymore. So what are you going to do? Carmen asked. I smiled, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in years. I'm going to show them that Mary Collins is no longer the woman who silently accepts everything. I'm going to show them that, at 59, I've finally learned how to value myself. Carmen smiled back. And how are you going to do that? I've got a plan, my friend. And you're going to help me, right? Of course. Whatever you need. For the first time in decades, I felt truly in control of my own life. And that feeling, it was incredible. The 3 days between that talk with Carmen and Saturday morning were the strangest of my life. On the outside, everything looked normal. I woke up on time, ate breakfast, sewed a few garments, watched a movie at 6 p.m. But inside, a quiet revolution was happening. Every day, I met with Carmen to prepare for the plan. On Thursday, we went downtown to take care of a few necessary things. On Friday, she helped me organize all my important documents. And on Saturday morning, when I woke up at 5:30, I knew my life would never be the same. I showered slowly. then chose the outfit that made me feel strong, dark blue jeans and a simple white cotton shirt. I made a pot of coffee and sat in the kitchen watching the sunrise. The sky was clear, the air was crisp, and the cool spring breeze floated in through the open window. Then, one by one, more cars arrived. David's, Lisa's SUV full of the kids, and finally a vehicle I didn't recognize, probably relatives or friends coming to help. I stood quietly in the kitchen, watching through the window. David got out of the truck with the air of a commander, navy polo shirt, confident stride, giving orders left and right to the movers. Lisa stepped out too, holding a stack of folders, probably her list for organizing the move. She was always a perfectionist. Ethan and Chloe ran toward the gate, laughing. Ethan, 7, was just like his father, stubborn, ambitious, and always got what he wanted. Chloe, 5, was shy but curious. For them, this was an adventure going to Grandma Mary's house, with its big yard and little garden to play in. And then there was Helen, Lisa's mother, slowly stepping out with her cane. She was around 73, her silver hair neatly tied up, wearing a floral dress that had clearly been chosen to make a good impression. I didn't know her well. We'd only met a few times at birthdays or Thanksgiving dinners. Always polite, short conversations. I stayed silent, watching it all. David was orchestrating everything like a conductor, giving orders, checking his list. 2 middle-aged movers leaned against the truck, smoking and waiting for directions, and I knew in just a few minutes my old life would officially be over. Then I heard David say to Lisa, "Mom's probably still asleep. She always sleeps in on weekends." Lies. He knew perfectly well that I woke up early every single day, even on Sundays. But that was David for you, always assuming he had the right to define my life, even though he never truly understood me. Lisa looked nervous. I noticed it right away. She kept running her fingers through her hair, her usual habit whenever she was tense. "Maybe we should call first, just to let your mom know we're on our way?" "It's my mom. She won't mind." "Won't mind?" As if I wouldn't care seeing a moving truck full of furniture parked right in front of my house. As if my opinion didn't matter in the decision to move into my home. Exactly at 8 a.m. They decided to get started. David walked up to the front door and rang the bell once, then twice. I let it ring, curious how long his patience would last. "Mom, we're here!" he called out, knocking harder on the door. "Well, if you're here, open it." I got up from the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and walked over to open the door. And there they were, the whole family, standing on my porch. David stood in front, smiling confidently. Lisa was right behind him, clutching her stack of folders, forcing a polite smile. The 2 kids hid behind their parents, suddenly shy. And Helen, Lisa's mother, leaned on her cane, looking at me with a mix of gratitude and confusion. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "Good morning, Mom. Ready for the big day?" David said, sounding as cheerful as if it were his birthday. "The movers are here, Mom. We'll start unloading, okay?" I looked out at the street, where the moving truck sat, boxes piled high, furniture crammed together, appliances, tables, chairs, countless boxes of all sizes. "David, can I talk to you for a minute? Just the 2 of us." He looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, Mom." "Everyone, hang tight for a bit." We walked into the living room. I closed the door behind us. David sat down on the sofa, still smiling, but his eyes began to narrow with suspicion. "Son, I have something important to tell you." "Go ahead, Mom, but make it quick. The movers charge by the hour." I nodded slightly. It was clear what he cared about was the money, not what I was about to say. "David, you and your family are not moving in here." His smile vanished instantly. "What?" You heard me. You're not moving into this house. He froze for a few seconds, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Mom, are you joking? Everything's already set. I rented the truck, paid for it, ended our lease. You said yes, I said. All right, David. That didn't mean I agreed. It meant I heard what you said. David jumped to his feet, clearly furious. Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't back out now. There are people depending on this. I'm not backing out, David. I never got the chance to give my opinion in the first place. My opinion? You're my mother. Your opinion is to help your family, that's it. And there it was, the raw truth. In my son's eyes, my opinion never counted. I was just the person who always said yes, always helped, always sacrificed. David, for 32 years, I've raised you, paid for your education, and held this family together, all by en masse. Myself. But now, at 59, I want to live for myself. For yourself? What do you even do besides watch TV and sew? Living with family would be better. Better for who, David? I looked straight into his eyes. For me? Or for you? That question shut him up. He started pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. Mom, you can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? I already paid for the truck. Everyone knows today's moving day. That's what happens when you make decisions without asking first. But we're family. Family respects each other, David, and respect means asking before changing someone else's life. He stopped and stared at me. You can't be serious, Mom. I'm completely serious. So what am I supposed to tell Lisa, the kids, my mother-in-law? Tell them the truth that you all made a decision without asking the one person who matters most in this story. David stormed out of the room like a hurricane. I followed, knowing the hardest part was still ahead. Everyone, listen up, he said sharply. Mom's having a moment. She's not feeling well today, so it's not a good time for visitors. What? Lisa asked, her face turning pale. Mrs. Mary, are you all right? Helen stepped forward, her voice full of concern. I'm perfectly fine, Mrs. Helen, I said, stepping out of the room. And no, it's not about my health. I just don't agree with you all moving into my house. The air went completely still. Lisa's mouth fell open. Helen froze. The kids, Ethan and Chloe, looked around, sensing something was very wrong. Grandma, we're not staying here? Ethan asked, his big eyes wide. No, sweetheart, you're not staying here. But why? Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Don't you love us anymore? My heart clenched. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. That they'd use the children to make me give in. I love you both very much, I said, keeping my voice steady. But love doesn't mean we have to live under the same roof. Lisa stammered. Mrs. Mary, I don't understand. David said you agreed. David never asked me, Lisa. He just told me you were moving in. But our situation is really tough. The apartment's too small, and my mother needs care. I understand, Lisa. But understanding doesn't mean I'm obligated to fix it. David's face flushed red with anger. Mom, you can't do this to us. We're family. Family that doesn't respect me enough to ask what I want? What are we supposed to do now? Where are we going to stay? What? That's for you to figure out, David. You're both adults, you have jobs, you're capable. Handle it. One of the movers approached. Sir, should we unload or not? We've been standing here for half an hour. David looked at the man, then at me, then at his family. No, don't unload. Change of plans. Change of plans? Lisa's voice trembled. I stood there silently, watching the scene unfold. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I just felt free. We have nowhere else to go, David said. Then you'll have to figure it out, get a hotel, stay with relatives, anywhere else. But you're not staying here. Helen stepped closer. Mrs. Mary, please. I know this is terribly inconvenient, but my family is really struggling. I looked at the older woman, someone who wasn't at fault, yet was being used by my own son as an emotional shield. I felt compassion for her. But I also knew that if I gave in now, I'd never be respected again. Mrs. Helen, I'm very sorry for your situation, but this decision should have been discussed with me beforehand, not after everything was already arranged. Mom, that's cruel. Mom, David said, his voice trembling, a tone I'd never heard from him before. Cruel? I said quietly. Cruel is when you make decisions about someone else's life without asking. Cruel is when you use children and the elderly to emotionally manipulate your own mother. The two kids started crying. Lisa was in a full panic. Helen sat frozen, her eyes vacant, and David, he looked at me as if he were seeing a stranger. You've changed, Mom, he said softly. Yes, David, I replied. I've changed. At 59, I've finally learned how to respect myself. One of the movers walked up. Sir, what's the decision? If we don't unload, we still have to charge for the full day. Take everything back, David said, his voice low. I stood in the doorway, watching as they loaded the boxes back onto the truck. Lisa cried quietly. Helen sat on the curb, looking lost. The two kids didn't understand what was happening, and me, for the first time in decades, I felt relief. As for David, he looked at me with a strange mix of disappointment, anger, and something new. Respect. When the truck finally drove away, I closed the door and leaned against it. My house was quiet again. My peace had returned. But what I felt wasn't just peace. It was a blend of relief, sadness, and something entirely new. Pride. For the first time in her life, Mary Collins had said no, and the world kept turning. I thought that after they left, I'd have a few days of calm, but I was wrong. On Sunday morning, David came back, this time alone. His face carried an expression I'd never seen before, restrained anger and stubborn determination. It was clear he'd spent all night thinking of ways to make me change my mind. I was watering my lavender and basil in the backyard when I heard the gate open. I didn't need to turn around. I recognized his footsteps on the brick path. Finished watering the rosemary pot before turning around. Good morning, David. Did you sleep well? No, Mom, I didn't. We had to stay at a cheap motel off the highway because we had nowhere else to go. What about Lisa and the kids? They're staying with Lisa's uncle, he said bitterly. And Helen had to move in with her youngest son. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for us? I set the watering can down and looked him straight in the eye. David, you're all adults now. Things like this are part of grown-up life. Adults learn to find their own solutions. Mom, for God's sake, we're family. And because we're family, I said calmly, you all should have respected me enough to ask before making a decision that affects my life. He started pacing around the yard like an animal cornered. Okay, Mom, I get it. We were wrong not to ask first. But you've made your point, haven't you? Can we just go back to how things were? I almost laughed. Back to how things were, David? You think this was some kind of moral lesson? No, this was a decision, and it's final. He stopped and stared at me. You can't be serious. We're family. This house is too big for you to live in alone. This house is just perfect for me, David. But Mom, you'll get old. You'll need someone to take care of you. When that day comes, I said slowly, I'll hire a professional caregiver, someone who helps because it's their choice, not because of guilt or emotional manipulation. David's expression changed. He seemed to realize that this time, His mother truly wasn't backing down. Mom, I don't understand. You used to be kind, forgiving. I'm still kind, David. But being a good mother doesn't mean being a servant. Servant? What are you talking about? I never treated you like that. Really? I looked him straight in the eyes. You unlocked my front door without permission, just to announce that 4 people would be moving into my home without ever asking if I agreed. What would you call that? He went silent. I saw his eyes shift as if, for the first time in his life, he was finally seeing things from my perspective. But Mom, I thought you'd be happy. You always said living alone was lonely. I never said I was lonely, David. You did. You're the one who decided that me living alone in this house was something sad. But did you ever stop to ask lonely for whom? For me? Or for your own conscience? He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. For the first time in his life, my son had nothing left to say. Sit down, David, I said, pointing to the wooden chair next to the flower trellis. I want to tell you something. He sat down, his face still tense. Do you know how long it took me to buy this house? I don't know. A few years? I saved every penny, worked late into the night, and gave up everything a woman should be able to enjoy, all for one reason. He looked at me silently. Because I wanted a place that truly belonged to me. A place where I could live as myself, where no one could tell me what to do. What color to paint the walls, when to wake up, or what to eat. No one was trying to tell you what to do. David, I interrupted. For the past 3 days, you've been assigning everyone to rooms, deciding who sleeps where, which furniture to move all inside my house without asking if I agreed. Do you see the contradiction? He stayed silent again. And you know what? I continued firmly. This house isn't just where I live. It's a symbol of my independence. It's proof that after your father died, I rebuilt my life on my own. It's the greatest achievement of my life. David started to speak, but I raised my hand. Let me finish. Because right now, you and your family are trying to turn that achievement into a solution for your problems. You want me to give up my peace, my privacy, and my own rhythm just to fix a mess you created yourselves. David covered his face with his hand, clearly frustrated. And the worst part, I went on, is that you all did it believing I didn't have the right to say no, that my opinion didn't matter. So much that you didn't even bother to ask what it was, I replied calmly. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I looked at my son and saw that he was actually thinking about what I'd said. For the first time, I noticed a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Mom, I guess I never saw it that way, he said quietly. I know, son, I replied softly. You're used to thinking that I'm always here, always ready to handle everything for the family. But that's not who I am. Then who are you? That question caught me off guard. I thought for a few seconds, then said, I'm Mary Collins, a 59-year-old woman who's worked her whole life, raised 3 children alone, built her life from the ground up, and now just wants to live the rest of it with dignity. So that means you won't help the family anymore? No. It means I'll help when I choose to help in the way I choose to not, because I'm pressured or because someone assumes I have to. David stood up, pacing across the yard. What if I apologize? What if we sit down and talk it out, set some boundaries, some ground rules? David, this isn't about boundaries. It's about choice. And I choose not to live with 4 other people in my house. But where are we supposed to go? You'll figure it out. You're adults, capable ones. It might be hard. It might take time. But that's what being an adult means. You can't expect me to keep fixing everything for you. David stopped and looked at me. In his eyes, I saw both disappointment and respect. You really have changed. No, I've grown. And finally, I've learned how to value myself. What if I told you this could damage our relationship? If our relationship can only survive when you don't respect me, then maybe it should change. Those words came out of my mouth with a firmness that even surprised me. David stood there silently, staring at me, as if the woman before him was someone entirely different. Mom, I can't believe you're doing this. And I can't believe it took me 59 years to finally do it. He turned away, walked toward the gate, then stopped. Mom, this isn't over. I'll figure something out. But I mean it. This isn't finished. It's finished for me, David. You're not moving in, and that decision won't change. After he left, I sat down on the chair he'd just been in and took a deep breath. A strange feeling rose inside me, part relief, part sadness. Relief because I'd stood my ground. Sadness because our relationship had come to this. But for the first time in my life, I had set boundaries, protected my space, my peace, and my choices. And even if it meant David pulling away, I knew I had done the right thing. I looked around my little garden, the potted plants I'd tended myself, the chair where I sipped coffee every Sunday morning, the clothesline where I hung laundry at my own pace. Everything was still mine, still my peaceful haven. And for the first time in years, I felt that it was enough. That afternoon, I called Anna and Laura to tell them everything. I was afraid they'd judge me, but both of them supported me completely. You did the right thing, Mom, Anna said. David's always acted like you owe him something. Laura added, you deserve to live in peace, Mom. We're proud of you. When I hung up, I realized something. I had raised 3 children, but only 2 of them truly understood what respect meant. Maybe it was too late to teach the third, but it was never too late for me to learn how to respect myself. And that's exactly what I was doing. At 59. 6 months had passed since that fateful Saturday morning, the day that changed my life completely. Today, as I sit in my small kitchen, sipping my morning coffee alone and moving at my own pace, I can say with certainty, these have been the freest 6 months of my entire life. The first week after the confrontation felt strange. Each morning, I still caught myself expecting to hear the kids running around, or Lisa cleaning up, or Helen coughing in the next room. But all I heard was silence. My silence. My peace. At first, it felt a little empty. Not regret, just a strange void, one I couldn't decide was comforting or frightening. For so many years, I'd lived only to meet other people's needs until I forgot how to live for myself. Carmen was the one who helped me during those first few weeks. Every morning, she'd come over for coffee and help me relearn how to just be Mary Collins, not Mom, not Grandma, not the fixer of everyone's problems. One morning, she said, you know what you should do, Mary? Make a list of everything you've ever wanted to do but never got the chance. I laughed. A list? I'm 59. What else could I possibly want? But that afternoon, as I sat alone in my living room, I started to think, and little ideas began to bloom like spring flowers after a long winter. I'd always wanted to learn to drive, but never had the money or time. I wanted to learn to cook, not to feed anyone, but to make meals I enjoyed. I wanted to travel, even if just to nearby towns. And I wanted a real garden, not just a few potted plants on the porch. Thanks to the secret savings I'd built up over 2 years, I began turning those dreams into reality. The first thing I did was sign up for driving lessons. At 59, I was the oldest student in the class, but also the most determined. My young instructor, Carl, looked at me in surprise. Mrs. Mary, you're picking this up faster than most of the younger ones, and you drive more carefully, too. When I held that driver's license in my hand, I bought myself a used navy blue car, not fancy, but mine. And the first time I placed my hands on the steering wheel, sitting alone in that car, it felt like an entirely new world had opened before me. My second accomplishment was the little garden behind my house. I hired a gardener to help me turn the patch of grass into a real green space. We planted roses, lavender, and a small bed of herbs. Every morning, I water the plants and talk to them. It might sound silly, but I can feel they understand that finally, someone is caring for them with love and patience. After that, I signed up for a cooking class at the community center. For so many years, I had cooked out of duty, always thinking about what others wanted to eat. But in that class, I learned how to cook for myself. I realized I liked bold flavors, delicate desserts, and that I had a real talent for making fresh pasta by hand. My two daughters, Anna and Laura, visited often, always surprised by how much I'd changed. "Mom, you're so different now," Anna said one Sunday afternoon. "You look happier." "I'm learning who I am again," I replied, serving the shrimp risotto I'd just learned to make. "Learning who I am when I'm not trying to please everyone else." Laura asked, "And what about David? Have you heard from him?" I knew that question was coming. David had called me a few times in the first 2 months, but I didn't pick up. Not out of anger, but because I knew he still wasn't ready to see the real me. Later, I heard from a neighbor that they had rented a large house in the suburbs with a yard. I told my daughters, "It sounds like things are going well for them." Lisa's gone back to work, and Helen is living with her youngest son and being well cared for. The truth is, even though I miss my grandchildren, Ethan and Chloe, I don't miss the exhaustion and tension of living around David. For the first time in decades, I wake up each morning without worrying about whose problems I'll have to solve that day. By the 4th month, something happened that changed everything. That day, I was at the local grocery store picking out ingredients for baking when I heard a familiar voice. "Mrs. Mary?" I turned around. It was Lisa, my daughter-in-law, with Ethan and Chloe. The kids ran up and hugged me tightly, and my heart ached with longing. "Grandma, where did you disappear to?" Ethan said, wrapping his little arms around my neck. "We missed you so much," Chloe whispered softly, just as shy as ever. Lisa looked different, more mature, more confident. "Mrs. Mary, how have you been?" "I'm doing well, Lisa. Really well. And you all?" "We're getting used to the new house. It was tough at first, but it's better now." Lisa told me David had been promoted, the kids loved their new school, and Helen was being taken care of at her youngest son's home. Before we said goodbye, Lisa said, "Mrs. Mary, I wanted to apologize. That means a lot to me." She hesitated, then asked, "If David apologized, would you forgive him?" I looked at Lisa, then at my two grandchildren watching me closely. "Lisa, I never stopped loving my son. But the relationship between a mother and her son can only continue if he understands that I, too, have rights and dreams of my own. If he can see me as a person, not just a mother who's always ready to sacrifice everything." Lisa nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "But only on one condition: come for joy, not out of obligation." 2 weeks later, David showed up at my door alone. The arrogance and self-assurance he used to carry were gone, replaced by a humility I'd never seen in my son before. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, son. Come in." He sat down in the living room. Looking around, everything was neat, bright, and full of new life. "This house feels different," he said softly. "Because I'm different too, David." We sat in silence for a few moments before he finally spoke. "Mom, I came to apologize. Truly, I never thought about your feelings. I always assumed you were meant to take care of us like it was your duty. I never once thought you might have dreams or desires of your own." He paused, his voice trembling. "These past few months, I've realized I never really knew who my mother was. I only knew the woman who fixed all my problems. Now, I want to know, Mary, the woman you really are when you're not carrying anyone else's burdens. My eyes filled with tears. For the first time, my son saw me as a whole person. David, I said, my voice shaking, I'll always be your mother. But now, I'm also myself. Then, will you give me a chance to start over? A different, better relationship? Of course, son. But this time, it has to be on both of our terms, with respect and understanding. I understand. He stood up to leave, then stopped at the door. Mom, are you happy? I looked around my home, the cozy kitchen where I'd learned to cook, the sunlit garden, and the soft golden light streaming through the curtains, glowing over the simple wooden table. I smiled. Yes, David. For the first time in many years, I truly am happy. Now, as I write this story, I'm 60 years old. I just had my birthday last week, and I can say with certainty, I've learned how to live, not to please others, not to be accepted, not to prove I'm worthy. I live for myself, respecting my own limits and expecting others to do the same. David and I are rebuilding our relationship slowly, but sincerely. My grandchildren, Ethan and Chloe, visit often, and this time it feels peaceful because there's no obligation, only genuine love. Anna and Laura remain my greatest source of strength. The three of us often call each other and cook together on weekends. And me. I'm Mary Collins, the woman who took 59 years to realize that loving yourself isn't selfish and that sometimes saying no is the greatest act of love you can give yourself. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real situations in life, with names and places changed to protect privacy. But its emotions, the pain, the awakening, the journey back to oneself are things many of us can understand. Mary didn't stand against her family out of anger, but because she chose to respect herself after years of living only for others. Sometimes, real love isn't endless sacrifice, but the courage to set boundaries. If it were you, when your loved ones cross that line, would you stay silent and endure, or speak up to protect your peace? Whatever path you choose, believe that God is always beside you, blessing and strengthening those who dare to live true to their hearts. Stay until the end of this video and pick one of the two stories on the screen because maybe, just maybe, you'll find a part of yourself in one of them.